Hello, my name is Julianne. I'm an astrologer, and today I want to talk to you about the Jupiter Chiron sextile. Basically, this configuration in the sky right now is pointing to a time in which we are guided inwards to perfect our own language of medicine. What does that mean? So there's three components here I'll talk through pretty briefly. The first is Jupiter, the second is Chiron, and the third is a sextile. So Jupiter is a planet in the sky, and archetypally speaking, Jupiter is about how we know things, how we learn, and our wise mind, the wisdom that we kind of carry innately within each of us. And this can also reflect where we are best suited for learning, for expansion, for growth. Um, Jupiter is our personal truth in that way. Jupiter is the reality in which we can articulate the cosmology and philosophy that we can see and share and point to. In that way, Jupiter is a lot about our culture and, you know, our values and our ethics and our personal moral system because it is the reflection in our behaviors, in our culture, in our life, in our own dynamic pursuit of learning. Again, that we can see. Jupiter is visible. There's nothing mysterious about Jupiter. Jupiter is a process of learning, but it's incredibly wise. Jupiter is where we know that we know. Jupiter is our intuition. It's our knowing of ourself. It's where we know that we can know anything at all, if that makes sense. So, Jupiter manifests both in our natal chart as well as in the transiting sky. So in the natal chart, it will reflect most of what I've just spoken to. And then in the birth chart, sorry, in the transiting chart, Jupiter will reflect in a more dynamic, moment to moment kind of way, the way that we are individually and the way that we are collectively learning, we are growing, the way that we are um, expanding our own horizons of knowledge and pursuing that expansion in a really tangible way. So consider where Jupiter is in your birth chart and consider the sign that it's in, just for a very basic level contemplation of what the truth is for you, the kind of lower T truth that you can share. Kind of your like elevator pitch for what you believe in this life. So then in um, transit, it's not to say that we don't believe where Jupiter is in transit, but we just have a much more deeper connection to where Jupiter is in our own birth charts. Right now, Jupiter is in the sign of Gemini, which is, this is a signature like all signatures that can be interpreted in many, many ways, but essentially Jupiter in Gemini is about the expansion of data, the expansion of um, pieces. Gemini is all about the pieces and the data points and the the maps, the puzzle pieces instead of the larger picture. Gemini is all about, pardon my voice today. Gemini is all about this, right? Like the very dynamic conversation, back and forth, duality, devil's advocate, angel on your shoulder, communication. In Gemini, you're going to get the data you need by following your curiosity. And in when Jupiter is in Gemini, we are learning, right? We are following our greatest path towards expansion and education through a lot of data. At times, Jupiter in Gemini and Jupiter anywhere it goes can feel like too much of a thing because there is really this great awareness, great abundance, great um, manifestation of whatever the sign of Jupiter is in, because that's where what we know to be true for ourselves. So when Jupiter is transiting through Gemini as it is right now, the way that I've been understanding it and kind of putting it together is that, each of us and collectively are learning a new language. Gemini is all about communication, about language, about the pieces that you have to learn to put together before you can actually communicate a larger idea. So this Jupiter and Gemini transit, which is really just about a year, by 2025, Jupiter is going to move out of Gemini. Jupiter is, the way I see it, we are learning a new language in this time. And that language is essentially a language of ourself. It's like one manifestation of the true language of our souls. And that is a very dynamic language. It's not one that can be, fully learned and mastered in 1 year. That is a silly thing to even say, but there's a new set of data that each of us are kind of choosing to master in this year and really learn from. And that's the essence of Jupiter and Gemini for me. It's we're learning, each of us, to follow curiosity and things kind of at face value instead of needing to get direct, deep, penetrable meaning from everything. Like things are a lot lighter now if we consider the perspective of Jupiter and Gemini right now. So considering your own life, if there's an area in which you are kind of really having to learn or choosing to learn a new language in a sense, a new area of your life you've decided to get a little bit more serious about, but you can still hold it a little bit lightly. Jupiter isn't a very serious planet in and of itself, and neither is Gemini. But there is an element of mastery in the archetype of Jupiter. There's an element of teaching in Jupiter, because what you know, you can teach. The idea of knowledge is that it can't be refuted. The point isn't for it to be completely or the point is that the person who knows it doesn't have to defend it and can articulate it from really all angles. And therefore, the archetype of Jupiter is also a teaching archetype. It's a wisdom archetype when it is matured. So, with that little preamble, what else? The next planet I'll go to is Chiron. Chiron's not actually a planet. Chiron is an asteroid that sits between Saturn and Uranus in our solar system. Chiron is what's called a centaur asteroid. Chiron is a name that comes from yet another Greek myth, again about a masterful teacher. The catch with Chiron is that this teacher, this archetype, comes into mastery of its own teachings through woundedness, through an experience of being hurt. And that pain is an incurable pain. So, despite this teacher, Chiron, being known as the best teacher of literally every subject, including medicine, this teacher could not heal themselves. That's kind of the old mythology of Chiron, is this idea of the wounded healer. So where Chiron shows up in our charts at birth is often a reflection of where we feel somehow eternally wounded in a place, or as though this is a part of life where we haven't, despite our greatest efforts, we haven't been able to heal or come to, um, honestly, the word is heal. We just haven't been able to heal it despite repeated attempts, despite, and really when we go close to that archetype, we have a very physical felt sense of being wounded, of being really um, in pain. That's the story that we've been telling around Chiron for as long as I think, pop astrology has been around. And as long as the Chiron myth has been around, which is probably a really long time. Um, I'm not here to say that that's wrong because I personally feel Chiron very deeply in my life and can resonate with the truth of that archetype. I will, however, say that um, what we tell, what stories we tell collectively, what stories we repeat over and over, have weight and they do things. And so there's been there's been a bit of an effort within some astrological communities, and I'm certainly a proponent of this, to rewrite the Chiron story, and in many ways rewrite a lot of the astrology stories. Specifically, the Chiron is just such a clear example of going from keeping someone in a wounded space just because that's what the archetype says. The wounded healer archetype would imply that you can't heal. You're doomed in a way. And I think there's an upgrade to that we can all kind of lean into as the healed healer, as the healer that does know how to heal themselves, and in fact, the healer that knows how to heal someone else by specifically making space for that person to heal themselves instead of the healer to come in and somehow be the magic touch. I think so often in our worlds, especially the worlds of the subtle arts, astrology, tarot, divination, anything, even in modern medicine, right? It's a question of power dynamics. You can look at it that one way. That's not the only lens through which you can see healing, right? But who are you giving power to heal you? Whose perspective are you prioritizing? And is that perspective actually working for you? I think the metaphysics of that, the reality of that, is super dependent on the person, on the soul, on what the soul needs. And I'm not here to say that one type of medicine, this is not medical advice, please, please, yeah, not medical advice, but um, nor is it emotional advice either necessarily, because I think, my experience with Chiron has more been about emotional wounding. I think many people's Chiron experience can be about that emotional wounding. It's a deep childhood wound for many people, and often childhood wounds are emotional in nature of, whatever, neglect, blah blah blah. Okay, so where am I going with this? The healed healer is that of a teacher. And that's kind of the kind of upgraded archetype of Chiron that I'm really very interested in myself. Because when you come to any type of astrologer, tarot, healer, blah, 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 you can recognize that you have everything you need within you to heal yourself. And oftentimes it's a matter of, like, even when we have medicine or we have a good reading or we have this, it's like your own realizations have to be either on par or completely catalyzed by whatever the addition or whatever the external person is doing. Like you have to put in some type of work, even if it's a if you, even if it's just a work of being vulnerable and then allowing yourself to be realized. The whole point of healing, as I see it, is making a space, making a container, setting the right conditions for someone to heal themselves. Um, Instead of venerating someone as having the answers for you or knowing the thing for you. So much of life is just about creating containers for yourself, creating the right environment for you to do you, and then taking responsibility of that container, of that environment, and realizing within the right container, you can do literally anything. Obviously, not as simple for many of us, myself included, as to just say it's just about the container. It is, but we don't work alone. We work with other people, and that's the beauty of things like astrology, tarot. We don't have to become masterful at everything ourselves. We can place our trust in a relationship to one of these people that they will have the integrity to hold space in such a way where it will heal us. We can show up in a way to heal ourselves. So all of this is to go back to Chiron. Chiron is an incredibly vulnerable, incredibly sensitive point in the chart where we are. I've heard it described by Tom Jacobs as like a lightning rod. There's certain resonances in the world that we have a direct, immediate knowing about, and Chiron is one of them. And the idea is when you come to a more, um, I don't want to say necessarily healed just yet. I don't think we're all necessarily there yet. I think we can get there collectively. But when we come to a more self-empowered relationship with our Chiron, then it's such a gift. It's like, and even within the Chiron mythology, the gift of this teacher is that because the teacher lives with this wound eternally, the teacher knows it so well and is so easily able to heal and diagnose it in other people, but they just can't with themselves. Um, right. And that is just another layer of the story, which we can unpack more about it in this idea of the upgrading of the archetype, but I digress. So now what happens when Jupiter and Chiron are in a sextile? This specific sextile that's happening in the sky right now, I can show you, and then I'm just going to bring it back, is a first quarter sextile. Here's Jupiter at 21 degrees of Gemini, and here's Chiron in Aries. I didn't really speak to the Aries part of Chiron, so let me do that really quick. Chiron in Aries, Chiron entered Aries in, I think it was 2018, and I think it'll be in Aries until 2028. So this is a really long-term kind of storyline playing out with Chiron. And in Aries, it's all about ourselves. It's like our literal breath manifestation of self. It can also be our competitive edge. It can be our self-assertion. It can be our willpower. And on a more meta level, it's about the archetype of the masculine, like yang energy, taking action on something. Um, Immediate, rather almost impulsive action. So Chiron in Aries, very high level archetypally speaks to wounded, feeling wounded in your ability to assert yourself. And on an even, higher level, I would say it's feeling wounded in the very fact of your existence. I think for many people, there is a core wound around, oh damn, I actually exist. Is that right? And it's a really interesting thing to think about. But we've been sold a story, at least in the West, for so long, all around the world, in Christianity and other, this idea of original sin is very much so a Chiron and Aries story for me of like There's nothing you could have done. You showed up wrong immediately. You showed up wounded. Aries, Chiron. You appeared wounded. You were born with a wound. And it's unhealable. Like, good luck, right? I don't actually think that's it. I think this is a signature. This is a moment in time where we are relearning to balance out our assertion, our masculinity, our self, because it's really just about your identity and how you actualize yourself at every single moment. Aries isn't really about your story. Aries isn't really about, your family or your lineage or even the future you want to create. Aries is about like right now, like what feels good right now, what feels right now, what action is ripe to be taken right now. Um, and so Chiron and Aries, it really depends person to person how, where it's falling in your chart, how it's going to be showing up for you. But this can also be a lot about wounding in the body, wounding in the physical body, and specifically chronic pain. So last year around this time, the North Node was very, very close to Chiron. So if you think back to around this time last year and many months before and after that, um, we've all kind of been apprenticing our own wound in a way because the North Node has been leading us right into Chiron for such a long amount of time, and it's much more widely separated now. And so you know maybe that sense of pain or woundedness has been lessening, which is wonderful. But okay, this is just to talk about the Aries. So let's go to the sextile now. um, Aries and Chiron right now are speaking to each other. In astrology, an aspect is when there is a really pretty direct kind of geometrical alignment happening in the sky. This is called a sextile. It's when two planets are either 60 degrees, excuse me, or 200, 300 degrees from each other. Um, and in this case, what I showed you, these planets are 60 degrees from each other. Um, Jupiter is in the sign of Gemini, and Aries is in the sign, sorry, Chiron is in the sign of Aries. Chiron moves much, much more slowly than Jupiter, and so you trace the elongation of the aspect from the slower moving planet to the faster moving planet. Thereby, Jupiter is in a first quarter degree sextile to Chiron. What does that mean? Well, this specific sextile, the first quarter degree sextile that starts at the beginning of the cycle, is reflective of a moment within a larger cycle where we have decided what we are focusing on, and we are bringing it inwards. This sextile is about, again, deciding to really focus and really get everything in line, understood, to do the work, to do the preparatory work, um, because there will be a point in the future where we will need to share this work outside of us. But right now, we need to prepare what we will share. So, okay, how does this fit with Jupiter and Chiron? So, I'm thinking about this in a way where these are both strong teaching and healing archetypes, strong wisdom archetypes. So, I think that's the reason I wanted to talk about this in a video because it's gonna go relatively unnoticed. I think this aspect will be strongest between now and through the first half of November of this next month. Um, so what's happening is, back when Jupiter was in Aries 3 years ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, um, it made a conjunction to Chiron. So at that point, there was a seeding moment of this simultaneous like expansion of self, Jupiter and Aries, that was also expanding potentially where we were wounded, where we are learning to heal, where we are learning to heal ourselves, Chiron and Aries. That conjunction is about the synthesis of these two archetypes at that point, Jupiter and Chiron in Aries. So that was the seeding point. After the seeding point, you start to move yourself, you just keep going and you get a bunch of ideas. You get a bunch of possibilities. You get a bunch of like, okay, this is a great idea, or this is the idea. How am I going to actually start to take this into the world? Before the sextile happens, um, it's this whole chunk of time where we are pretty much deciding which way we're going to go. And you know this is happening because you can feel an amount of having to let go of ideas with maybe a lot of potential. Like when you get FOMO about one possibility that you're not going to take anymore. But there's a really unique invitation right now in this sextile to go inward and really understand what you've chosen when it comes to your healing, when it comes to how the words and the language that you are mastering and how you not only communicate, but how you listen, how you interact with the world around you on a moment to moment basis, and ultimately how you let your curiosity heal you. So Jupiter and Gemini is getting a lot of data about that is relevant to Chiron and Aries right now. So this is to say all of the data, the communication, all of the pieces in our life, and check in your own chart which house this is falling under, to give you a better idea. All of the data that you're getting within that area of life is directly relevant to Chiron and Aries right now. So also check where Chiron and Aries is to just help you synthesize what's going on. But instead of needing to go out in the world and profess mastery over this, take all the data that you've amassed and work with it. Like literally just go write a list of everything you've learned in the last 2 years and then narrow that down to what you've learned in the last 6 months with Jupiter being in Gemini. Let that churn for a while. This aspect, I'm speaking on and on about it because it's not a quick one. Jupiter's moving retrograde right now, so it's going to move out of this sextile, but then Jupiter will go direct again in a few months from now, and it will pass this sextile again. And so this is really, we've got several months of this process, of this aspect. So take your time with it over the next several months. Consider what might have been, resonant based on what I've said in this video. And really allow the process to help you heal too. At the time of recording this, October 20th. So we have the sun moving into a pretty tight square to Pluto today, tomorrow. We have the Mars-Pluto opposition coming closer and closer in the next 2 weeks. This is an incredibly heightened time period of potentially feeling like there are immediate things that we need to do in order to survive or in order to, yeah, quite literally survive. Um, this sextile is a much slower pace, and it is also a container in which we can do work that will help all of the other transits to make sense right now. Um, the last thing I'll say is that as this Jupiter Chiron sextile happens again in the next few months, as Jupiter goes retrograde and then goes direct again, it Jupiter will be making that square to Saturn again, which is a lot of pressure on the Jupiter, a lot of pressure on this language, on this data, on the curiosity that we have. It's almost like there's a being out there that is putting an incredible amount of pressure on this pursuit of knowledge and creativity that we are in the midst of right now. That's just the nature of this transit right now. Saturn is in Pisces making a square to Jupiter. So my my perspective right now is that this aspect to Chiron is actually helping us to heal and deepen in our sensitivity to why that language is important to us, um, kind of without needing the pressure of Saturn right now. I like Saturn. I don't think there's anything wrong with the pressure we're getting on Saturn, but it's definitely coloring the language that we're using. And so Chiron kind of helps us to circumvent that a little bit right now and go straight into the healing, go straight into the healing. So I'll just and finish by reiterating that this sextile is about going inwards. It's about self-reflection. It's like, how do I put it? It's like you go to a class, you are introduced to this new concept, and you let it wash over you in the beginning, and then you're like, okay, I'm gonna have to go home and sit with this for a while. This aspect is the going home and sitting with it for a while, like reading over your notes, maybe watching over the lecture again, letting it really sit into you because deep down you know this is what you want to study. Deep down, this is right, this is what you've chosen, but you're still understanding how it actually works. And you are coming into your own language, your own method of knowing it, not even just articulating it, but your own, how does it fit into your life? How does it make sense to you? Why does it make sense to you? And what is its relevance in the larger scope of things? So take your time, come in, come inwards. So, yeah, that's what I've wanted to share. I've been seeing this aspect a lot as I'm looking at the chart. So I wanted to bring it up. Let me know what you think. If this is helpful at all. And yeah, I will be back at some point very soon. Bye bye.